members here in the council chamber at Woking Borough Council and anyone else who's listening on YouTube. I welcome you to this meeting of the Planning Committee of Woking Borough Council on January 12th, 2022. This is a hybrid meeting. It's a hybrid meeting because some people are present while in the chamber, while others are participating remotely by using Microsoft Teams. As I said, the meetings are also being live streamed on YouTube. I'm Councillor Chris Bowring and I'm chairman. This is a hybrid meeting. The Planning Committee, most of whom are in the chamber with me, consists of 11 elected members, borough councillors, and is supported by a variety of officers. There are representatives on the committee from all political groups on the council. The officers, some are present with me here. Those present are Callum Wernham, who is a Democratic and Electoral Services Specialist and clerk to the committee. Officers who are remote are Chris Easton, Head of Transport, Drainage and Compliance, Lindsay Jennings, who is Senior Solicitor, Connor Corrigan, Service Manager, Planning and Delivery. This is a quasi-judicial meeting with formal procedures which must be adhered to. For each application, firstly, the planning officer will present the application. Then only those speakers who have pre-registered to speak will be called to address the committee. No one else, including borough councillors, town and parish councillors, agents, applicants, objectors or supporters, are permitted to address the committee, ask questions, interrupt or disrupt the meeting. Everyone has had a chance to comment on the applications through the normal consultation process. Please note that there is a strict time limit for speakers of 3 minutes for each of the 4 categories. It's town and parish councils, objectors, supporters, and borough members affected by the application. Members of the committee are more impressed by the quality of what you say rather than how long you speak for, but above all, please stay within your time limit. Following the registered speakers, members of the committee will discuss and debate the application and seek clarification from the council's professional planning officers in order to try to reach a decision. That decision reached by the committee may or may not agree with that recommended by the presenting case officer. Finally, it is the committee's responsibility to determine any valid planning application placed before it using current national and local planning policies and relevant decisions of the Independent Planning Inspectorate. Our role is not to suggest alterations to applications, not to consider whether they are a good idea, whether they're needed, whether they are too costly, and if there are alterations, alternative uses of the land or a more suitable site for the application. If you're joining us remotely, please ensure your camera is switched on only when you're speaking. And for everyone, please ensure that your microphone is switched on when speaking and off at other times. So thank you. So move on to the agenda. And the first item is apologies for absence, which I think is Rachel. Sorry, you tell me that.
Apologies received, Chairman, from councillors Gary Cowan and Rebecca Margett.
Thank you. Members, minutes of the previous meeting, are there any points to raise? No, in that case, I will sign the minutes. Are there any declarations of interest?
Bill? Thank you. Yes, I was asked to list this, let's say application for 99 Coleman's Moor Road, application 213520 by the Planning Department of Woodley Town Council and residents. Although I've asked for it to be listed, I will not be speaking for or against this application, but I will remain a member of the Planning Committee and make my decisions based on the What has been said in for and against it, and I won't make my decision until I have heard those remarks.
Thank you, Bill. We move on to the first. Oh, so the applications to be deferred and withdrawn. I believe there are none. Oh, sorry, Andrew.
Sorry, Chair. Application 213457, Liberty House, Strandway in Lower Early. Early Town Council Planning Committee, of which I am a member, has made a recommendation with respect to this application. I did not take part in their discussion or a vote on that matter. I have no predetermined view. I will listen to the presentations very carefully tonight and will participate in discussion and a vote with an open mind.
Thank you, Andrew. Applications to be deferred and withdrawn. I believe there are none. So we move on to item 67, which is a land to the west of St Anne's Drive in Woking. We did discuss this last time and refused the application. This is an amendment to the reasons for refusal. Joanne Carter is the case officer, so I'll hand over her to explain in a little more detail what we're here for.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is application number 203544, land to the west of St Anne's Drive and south of London Road, Wokingham. There is no visual presentation accompanying this item tonight. This is due to the scheme returning before members following the meeting of Planning Committee last month, where the scheme was presented and committee members resolved to refuse the proposed development on grounds relating to the reduction of settlement gap and the impact and loss of protected trees. The additional reasons are required as the development also fails to provide necessary mitigation through provision of infrastructure, services and facilities via the Section 106 agreement. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of any. Sorry, not doing well here. Councillor Peter Dennis, please, wish to speak.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak. Just to add to the comments there, the minutes of the meeting do say that there's an impact of the visual amenity, and that should be one of the reasons for the objection. I've just noticed the officer didn't make mention of that. Further, as well, when reading the Southern Development Land Opportunity, this area is indicated on there as green space, so that violates the SDL. So that's the comments I have to make.
Thank you. I think it's a question whether the minutes are correct or not. For what we decided. I don't know, Connie, do you want to comment on what Councillor Dennis has said?
I just talking quickly in terms of the visual amenity, one of the reasons for refusal, although not presented to members today, would state that the adverse impact on protected trees and the loss of them would also lead to adverse impact on the visual amenity of the green route and the local area. So that would be included as forming part of the refusal.
Okay, thank you. That's the only speakers. Any points, members? Nope. So go straight to the recommendation. This is on page 4. This is the supplementary agenda, not the green one. So there's 2 additional conditions. Can I see those who wish to support the addition of those 2? Thank you. I think that's unanimous. So those 2 conditions, sorry, not conditions, those 2 reasons for refusal.
Sorry, Chairman, it wasn't unanimous. I wish to abstain.
I beg your pardon. Okay, 1 abstention and how many? 8 in favour. Thank you. So that recommendation is accepted. The next item is 212350, which is the Sapphire Centre in Wokingham, and the case officer is Baldy Raleigh. Good evening, Baldy.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good evening, Chair. I'll just share my screen for the presentation. Can we all see this? So this is the application at the Sapphire Centre for the proposed erection of a new three-story commercial building following partial demolition of the existing building and reconfiguration of the site to include additional parking. This is a location plan of the site, so it's located within the Mulberry Business Park on Fish Ponds Road. This is the proposed site plan, which indicates the position of the new three-story building, which follows the demolition of the existing building. It will be connected to the existing units that you can see, and the reconfiguration of the site will include additional parking going from 20 spaces to 47. These are the proposed front and rear elevations. The proposed building will be 3 stories high with a maximum ridge height of 14 meters. The existing units which are to remain are single story and have a maximum ridge height of 6.75 meters. And these are the proposed side elevations of the buildings. Next few slides will go through the floor plans. So this is the proposed ground floor plan of the new building. This will be the main warehouse and loading and packing area of the development. The proposed first floor will provide a canteen and lab space, and the second floor plan will provide office space. It's a 3D visual that has been provided by the agent. So as you can see, the external appearance of the proposed building will be made up of varying shades of light and dark cladding, and will include areas of contemporary glass, and overall will provide a modern aesthetic to the building. And again, some more views provided of the proposed building. This is the existing site. So this is the current 2-story building on site, and these are the current units towards the left that will be remaining. Subject to the legal agreement and conditions set out in the report and the update, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Baldy. We have one speaker, Mr. Tom Sadler, on behalf of the applicant. Good evening, Mr. Sadler. Would you like to?
Hi there, good evening. Good evening, councillors. Yeah, my name's Tom Sadler, and I'm the planning agent acting on behalf of the applicant for this application. Given the recommendation for approval and the fact that there are no objections, I intend to keep this really succinct. But for context, the applicant, who is the owner and occupier of the site, is called Apicor, who you saw on the plans there, who are a diagnostic manufacturing company, and they play a critical role in the fight against COVID-19, producing some of the tests we've all started to live with in our daily lives and other medical issues across the country. For obvious reasons, the company is at critical capacity and therefore require additional and more efficient space as soon as possible in order to accommodate the significant demand they're facing. As per the officer's report, the proposals are entirely in accordance with planning policy at all levels, with no objections from officers, the town council or third-party neighbours, and we trust the committee will also approve this application this evening. The quicker this development can be completed, the better we will all be because of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sadler. Members, any points to make? Okay, Carl, Andrew.
Okay, thanks. There's a on page 26. There's the usual thing that says number of jobs created / lost, and then it says 30 FTE. I'm just wondering, is that created or lost, or is that how many there'll be the same afterwards? Just like that clarified, please. The other question I've got is on the height of the building is going to be 14 meters. The old one was 6.75, so it's a bit of a jump. And I see a lot of detail on separation distances to this building, which is fine. But I don't see anything about the heights of the surrounding buildings, so I'd just be interested to know what the comparison is for that.
Thank you, Carl. So clarification on the number of jobs which may be lost or gained, and comparison of heights with surrounding buildings.
Yeah, so in terms of employment numbers for the staff, there's no change. So it's currently 30 full-time employees, and that will remain. Essentially no jobs are lost or created, if that helps.
Is that okay, Carl? Okay, Andrew?
Or the heights. of,
Yeah, sorry.
yeah.
Hi, yeah, just to clarify, the 6.75 is the existing industrial units that are going to be remaining. The existing height of the building that's going to be demolished is actually 7 meters. So and obviously the new one will be 14. So there is an increase, of course, but given the location and the settings, we think the increase wouldn't be detrimental to the surrounding area, to the surrounding buildings.
Okay, Carl?
Well, just to say that we don't know what the heights are of the surrounding buildings, then that's fine. But yeah, I recognise it's an industrial area, so it's probably a bit of a moot point. But
Andrew?
Yes, thank you. Two short linked questions. Firstly, Baldeep, could you please confirm on the drawings where the existing entry point, exit point off Fish Ponds Road will be and whether it will change? There seems to be a difference between the drawings on page 35 and 47. I'm assuming that if there is in fact a difference, that the intended entry exit point will be shown in the drawings on page 47, which shows the positioning of the proposed building. Now, the reason for asking this is that it may have implications for the location of the bin storage area. So could you please also provide assurances that the bin storage shown on Fish Pond Road side of the site is positioned in a manner that will enable refuse vehicles to be able to exit without having to reverse onto Fish Pond Road?
Baldeep?
Sorry, I'm just bringing up the plans. You said page 35 and 47.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. In terms of while I do that, in terms of the bin question, as the report says, we haven't finalised the arrangements of the bin storage, so that will be secured by condition during that process. Obviously, how it will be collected from site will also have to be taken into consideration.
But the refuse lorries will be able to access, you will ensure that they'll be able to access safely. That's what Andrew's concern is, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that will be covered in the condition of how it will be accessed, because we have the full details to how they will collect it, sorry.
Evening. Yeah, you're right. The bin store is currently shown on site. They have provided some swept path analysis indicating how the commercial vehicles can enter and exit. Now, the bins won't be collected by your typical WBC refuse residential lorries. There will be a private commercial refuse collection that will be arranged here, and the servicing it is in a kind of a slightly unusual manner, but it's not that dissimilar to how it does now. And the vehicles will pull up on Fish Pond Road, which is used to having commercial vehicles on it, and it's shown that they would potentially reverse into the site. And that's obviously the detail that we're just trying to understand their servicing arrangements as to how they would manage that, i.e. would it be with one of the operatives in the vehicle or a banksman from the site, for example?
Andrew?
Yeah, that's fine, as long as that's on your radar, so to speak. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Rochelle?
I was just wondering how many apprentices will be actually trained there. Condition 47, page 32, says you will have some. Can we have a rough idea of how many apprentices and whether they will be local people, local young people or not?
I wouldn't know the full details of that, but that's going to be secured via the legal agreement to secure the employment skills plan. So I don't have the exact numbers at this stage, I'm afraid.
Okay. Angus?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I understood the planning officer in answer to Councillor Duran's question, saying that the number of employees was remaining at 30. If that is so, how can we understand that paragraph 30 on page 30, additional 27 parking spaces? Maybe the agent can help on this one.
I think obviously with the building itself and providing a further level and the fact it will be connected, I mean, from what we know, it will still be the same amount of employees, but yeah, if the agent is happy to jump in just to clarify that point.
Yeah, certainly. We are somewhat following the council's parking standards as well, relative to the size of the unit that we are proposing. Clearly, whilst once this development occurs, we will no doubt see a requirement for further employees. What is important is that there will by no means be a loss. If anything, there will be a gain in employees, and this additional parking space will be able to accommodate that. Although saying that, the site is in a highly sustainable location anyway, with great access to public transport, etc. So yeah, it was really a balance between meeting the highways requirements and future-proofing it. Thanks.
Thanks for the explanation.
Do we need to put a condition in to limit the number of employees in terms of the how much parking space has been put forward, which is excessive for 30, as I understand?
Chris, just to confirm, as the applicant or the agent just mentioned, the buildings are light industrial B2 use, and that just complies with our parking standards. So the unit would typically generate a certain amount of employment, and that's where our standards are calculated on. So it's on floor space and obviously on the kind of the usage that the building would have. So it complies with our standards, and that's that point. It brings it up to kind of modern day standards. It does make a valid point about it being in a relatively sustainable location, but obviously they've managed to achieve those level of parking, which ticks the box and enables the scheme to have a successful approval from highways.
Okay, thank you. Rochelle, I think I cut you off for you. You can ask a question. So
okay, real quickly, I'm just very happy to see that we're keeping employment space here and not changing into flats or substandard flats like most of the places are. I think it's a really good idea that we're increasing employment in the area.
Thank you. Sam?
Thank you, Chair. My question was in relation to page 22.10, biodiversity enhancements. It states here, prior to the occupation development, details of the biodiversity enhancements to include bird and bat boxes, etc. And the biodiversity enhancements shall thereafter be installed as approved. But there's no specific mention of what they might be. So it'd just be great. So if you could elaborate potentially on what those biodiversity enhancements might be.
I think the condition makes it pretty clear that it would be bird and bat boxes is what we're really aiming for. I think the condition is pretty clear on how we would want the applicant to achieve the enhancement.
Thanks, Bardi.
Stephen.
Thanks very much, Chris. I certainly would not favour any attempt to limit the number of people working here. I think the limit is imposed in effect by the number of spaces there are. I think, as does Rochelle, I take the view that this is extremely welcome to be actually having employment opportunity here. It's clearly on a business park. Yes, it is taller than the existing and probably most surrounding buildings, but it is on a business park. It's the kind of activity you would expect there. It's the kind of scale of building one would expect there. And I'm in favour of this application.
Thank you. Don't see anybody else wishing to speak. So no one proposing anything else. So we go to the recommendation on page 18, which includes amendment to condition 12 in the supplementary planning agenda. Let's see those in favour of approving this application, please. Very much. That is unanimous. Thank you. Move on to item 69, which is 213520, 99 Coleman's Moor Road in Woodley. this is before the committee, as Councillor Bilson listed it. And Baldy, it's you again, this one.
Yeah.
So over to you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this is for the application at 99 Coleman's Moor Road in Woodley. It's the full application for the proposed erection of 2 3-bedroom dwellings with associated parking following demolition of the existing dwelling house. It's the location of the existing site. The existing site comprises of a chalet-style bungalow and is located on a corner plot at the junction with Coleman's Moor Road and Coleman's Moor Lane. This map shows the private road highlighted in orange at the adjoining site, which is known as Loddon Gardens. Proposed site plan of the 2 dwellings. The dwellings will be north facing and the rear elevations will be towards the south. There will be a total of 5 vehicle spaces which will be accommodated to the front of the application site. The access to the site will be via the private road and the vehicle access to the new housing is indicated further up. These are the proposed elevations of the dwelling. They will be 2 stories high, including a loft level with a maximum ridge height of 9.4 meters. The next few slides will go through the floor plans of the dwellings. So both dwellings will have an identical layout. On the ground floor, it will consist of a kitchen, dining room, living room, and WC. This first floor plan will comprise of bedrooms 1 and 2 and a study. Bedroom 1 will have its own ensuite, and there will also be a main bathroom on this floor level. And the proposed loft floor level will provide bedroom 3 with an ensuite bathroom. Existing dwelling on site. Slide shows the existing vehicle access. This slide shows views of the application site, which is roughly taken from the front of the private road into Loddon Gardens. And this is the Loddon Gardens development next to the application site. This is taken directly opposite the application site, giving you views of the street. And this is views of the surrounding properties looking further down Coleman's Moor Road, from the application site. To the conditions set out in the officer report, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker, Mr. Andy McKinnon, who's a resident speaking against the proposal. Good evening, Mr. McKinnon.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, councillors. I'll try and keep this as short as possible. Our main objection is in the plans they're a little bit misleading. It does say that it was an adopted road. It's not an adopted road. It's a private road, part of the estate, which the residents all pay for the upkeep and lighting. In addition, there is no footpath to the properties that are shown on the map. It's plainly clear in the photographs that were shown. The footpath is actually on the right, which is part of the estate that the residents pay the upkeep for. It's actually a grassed area, and it was shown in that photograph that was adjacent to the property. You can see that on the left-hand side of the road. So our main objection is, we're not necessarily objecting to the development per se. Our main objection is the increased construction traffic that there was never planning for. No one ever planned for when they were buying the property. Additionally, our understanding is that the access is granted to number 99A, to number 99 at the rear of the property for basic access for a single dwelling, not 2 new houses and 5 cars or car parking spaces, which obviously increases the vehicular movement of the site. So I'm guaranteed that I'll try and keep this as brief as possible to allow time for discussion. I do have some other photographs, and but they're very similar to what was already presented. So I'd be open to any questions that people may have.
Thank you, Mr. McKinnon. Paul, do you want to comment on the points Mr. McKinnon made about construction traffic and vehicle movements, because there's 2 properties proposed?
Yeah, so in terms of the traffic management, the construction management, condition 4 has been implemented, which will require a construction management plan from the applicant, explaining how essentially the proposal will be built if in the event of an approval.
Thank you.
Sorry, just one additional point. I do apologise. There is an alternate access to the property on the left-hand side of the development, and there's proof that that's been in use in the past.
Okay, thank you. I'll come to Bill because he's local member.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a couple of points. Yeah, sure enough, on page 57, it isn't an adopted highway. It is private, as Mr. McKinnon's already pointed out. On page 58, 4A, it talks about parking of contractors' vehicles not being on the site. The problem we've had, this is a new development. The rest of the Loddon Gardens is a new development that came to this committee recently and has only recently been completed. Whilst that development was being constructed, contractors' vehicles were parking on Coleman's Road, and it caused considerable chaos. I do believe, and I need to be put right on this, and perhaps Chris could actually put us right, the bus stop that's right outside, I believe, was moved temporarily while that construction was going on. And I'm wondering whether, again, this would be necessary to move that bus stop, because it would make it impossible as it is for the buses to stop safely. So that's one question I would like answered. On page 63, concerning the consent being given for contractors' vehicles to be on the private road, a bit concerned about that. I don't know whether consent has been given for that to happen, for the constructors' vehicles to go on that road. That road is actually block paving, and I could see there would be considerable concern over some of the heavy vehicles that are using that road, damaging the road. And as Mr. McKinnon has said, they are responsible for the upkeep and repair and maintenance of that road. So I would like that to be clarified as to where the access for the construction vehicles would be. And I think that's really just the points that I would like to ask.
Thanks, Bill. Paul, do you have a look at those?
I think, is Chris okay to just jump in on the question about the bus stop first, and then I can answer the second question?
I can, other than unfortunately I can't answer that question. I wasn't involved in the finer detail of that site being constructed, although obviously that was a much larger site than obviously just the 2 dwellings on this one property. I think there is, I think has been mentioned, there is a condition on there to obviously look at the construction management, and that's part of the data that we look at the time. I think access obviously is it's a kind of an oddity on this one, and obviously I think subject to them having rights of access or not, that's a civil matter that will obviously be separate to obviously what we're discussing at this moment in time. And I guess that would be something that needs to be discussed with them in relation to how they would access to construct that site and where vehicles may park. But obviously that's something that can be presented via the Kemp if that's to be produced, and obviously agreed with the adjacent landowners who are obviously the residents on that new estate. But ultimately, I don't think we'd be overly in favour of granting temporary access to the front of the site to construct that and obviously move that bus stop subject to that being easy enough to be done, but we'd have to have a look at that, and that's not something that's in front of us at this moment in time.
Remember, Bill. Okay.
If I can just say that on page 58, section 4A, it says the statement shall provide for the parking of vehicles of site operatives and visitors. That is the concern where the site operatives would actually park, and that's my concern over them parking. You say, as I agree, it's a much smaller development, but you can still have the same number of trades required for 2 houses. You still need the plumbers, the carpenters, and the electricians. So the vehicles that would be possibly parking in Coleman's Moor Road would still be an issue.
Okay, Maureen.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask a question of the planning officer. I noticed that on page 87, you've got 2 bedrooms and a study. And I wondered whether there was any significance in the fact that that third room is annotated as a study rather than another bedroom, whether it would be big enough to be a bedroom, and whether there was any conditioning if it wasn't big enough to be a bedroom to make it not a habitable room from the point of view sleeping overnight in.
In terms of the sizes, all the rooms, including the study, would meet the requirement. I've noted that obviously they've got a bedroom on the loft level, but I don't think we can essentially condition to keep the study as a study.
Thank you. So we can assume it's a 4-bedroom house.
I mean, we're going via what the floor plans say, and it's labelled as a study, so we have to assume that would be the intention, that it's a study.
But if it could...
Sorry, Paul. Yeah, just looking at the plans, I mean, they could convert it to a bedroom. It could be an office, it could be a bedroom. Clearly, that's not what they're proposing, but that they have the option to do that.
Thank you, Connor. And there is a sufficient parking for a 4-bedroom house, isn't there?
Yes.
Thanks. I'm satisfied then. Thank you.
Rochelle.
May I suggest that the new residents actually join the association and pay their dues to pay for the upkeep of the road that they're going to be driving on? It might be a good idea. I don't know if that would be an informative or just a suggestion.
I think it's a planning matter, Tricia.
Well, it would be something useful to make the existing residents a little bit happier, having to pay for a road that somebody else is driving on.
Well, get a comment from the officer.
It's just a suggestion.
I don't think, I mean, anything to do with the private road and the access, etc. It's unfortunately negotiations with the applicant and the other parties, I'm afraid. So I don't think we can have it as an informative, as it wouldn't really be a planning matter.
Can I suggest then at least they do discuss it and come to some suitable arrangements?
Rochelle, a similar kind of, we sometimes do that when contractors are working on our public highway. We'll often do an exception report to review the road with the owners. So obviously we wouldn't get involved in that on this occasion. It would be between the applicant and obviously the owners of the road. It's kind of like a party wall agreement kind of document. You'll review the road, mark any damage and stuff to it, and then obviously you review again once it's constructed. And obviously they'll have had agreed, well, it's hoped that they would have agreed a status, and obviously they will bring it back to that level should there be any damage being identified via the advanced survey and then the post survey. That's what I would recommend that they would kind of do, but that's not something we could put on our report or encourage them to.
We can minute your comment, Rochelle. Stephen.
Thank you, Chris. I think essentially there are 2 separate issues we've got to try and keep separate here. The one is the planning application for the construction of the 2 new dwellings and all of the associated works with that. And the other is the access. Now, as I understand it, the access is via an unadopted private road. Whether access is actually attainable is not actually something for us to decide. access may not be attainable if the owners of the new development next door to the proposed site, proposed application site, decide not to allow access, then access is not allowed. That's a civil matter. They can decide to bar access, to prevent access. We have to judge the planning application on the merits of the proposed development. The access point really is not something over which we have control.
Thank you. Mr. McKinnon, did you want to make a brief point? See your hand
Yes, yeah, just a brief point. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there, just on planning, is there a condition on access to the property by a footpath and public services? Is there not a condition that would be required for that? Because there is no on the plans, it's got existing footpath, and actually that's incorrect. There isn't a footpath there, and it's on the private land.
I don't think we could have a condition regarding a footpath. I mean, there is already a gate, an existing gate, which gives access to the current dwelling. So I don't feel we. So
I'm sorry, just to correct that, the existing gate is for the road. If you look at your plan, there isn't an existing footpath where it says existing footpath.
I do understand that, but I don't think we can impose a condition for a footpath if that's the question that's being asked.
Sorry, yeah, that is the question.
Yeah,
I do.
sorry. No, from my opinion, I don't think we can impose a condition for a footpath.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yes, thank you. I've got 4 questions and I'd like to ask them in two batches, if I may. And the first is probing a little bit more on the matter of access. What's the legal position of WBC in terms of ability to grant or deny planning permission contingent upon access via privately owned land road of which the applicant is not a part owner? The report suggests that many of the concerns raised by residents who own this private road are a matter of civil law. I'd like clarification on WBC's position and any potential liability should it grant planning permission. For instance, could the owners of the private road challenge WBC's authority to grant planning permission? And then the second question is for clarification of point 5 on page 68. It says the application was revalidated due to access to ownership onto Loddon Gardens, which is a private road. Certificate B has been signed, which states notice has been served on Vanderbilt Homes. Could somebody please explain exactly what that means?
Chair, if I may, I could answer the first question.
Yes.
With regards to the access, the NPPF is quite clear that development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. The actual ability to access to and from the development site is a private issue because it's a private road. So it isn't something that the council would become involved in. It would be for the two parties, the one who has the rights and the one who requires the rights, to come to some agreement or negotiation with regards to that. So I don't see how the council could be involved in that private civil discussion, as my colleagues have already stated. I hope that answers your question on that point.
Yes, it does. That's reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. You're asking about the certificate B, though, weren't you, on Vanderbilt Homes?
Yeah, the certificate B had to be served because, as it's a private road, the applicants obviously don't own the land. So they essentially served notice on the owners. In this case, it was the developer of the site.
Okay, so that point is not actually part of the planning application. It's just a piece of information. But you had two more questions.
Yeah, okay, I think I've understood that, so thank you there. The next question again relates to the private road, and I know that this has to be caveated in all sorts of ways in view of just what has been said. But nonetheless, I'd like to ask how wide the private road is, and specifically that it's no narrower than other roads in such locations. Now, my reason for asking this relates to the statement that reversing from parking bays onto the private road does not represent an unreasonable traffic or safety implication. Now, so I'm just interested in a comment, about whether the width of the road would actually enable safe reversing into the road. And then page 76.74, it said, it's talking about a list of sustainability measures. And I'm just interested, what's the reason for stating that it's intended to incorporate the listed sustainability measures, rather than that they commit to doing this? And can officers confirm that none of those sustainability measures are obligatory? Also, many applications that we see include an energy statement. It includes commitments related to decentralized and or low carbon sources. This application is for 2 homes. Does this meet the threshold requirements for such an energy statement?
Just picking up on the point you talked about, width or the parking, the road depth width. In terms of the parking bays that are shown off the carriageway, typically you require, like for a shopping supermarket or whatever, you'd require 6 meters an hour width between 2 sets of parking bays, and that typically allows you for full manoeuvre. If you look at page 81 in the document, I think it's page 81, it shows obviously the layout of the site, and you can see that the parking bays are set back quite far off the carriageway. The carriageway, I believe, is 4.8 meters wide, and obviously you've got quite a distance between the edge of the carriageway to the back of the parking bays, which allow them the 6 meters to start to reverse, to be easily turning by the time they enter the carriageway. And that's not really any different to any other typical driveway reversing out onto some of the internal roads on the site adjacent to it. So from a highway safety point of view, I would say there is no issue. It's not backing out onto a main road, which obviously we were looking to try and ensure they enter and exit in a forward gear. And that obviously is the highway code in any event. So you'd imagine for their safety and to follow the highway code that they would reverse into their parking bays in any event, and follow that practice.
Thanks for that, Chris. Yeah. And the question about sustainability measures?
Yeah, in regards to the sustainability measures, due to the scale of the development, it wouldn't require an energy statement as such. And also the sustainability measures that are suggested are also subject to building control regulations. There's no policy requirement for us to enforce anything beyond applicants put forward as sustainability measures they want to include.
Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, I've understood the answer. I'm afraid I think that's a bit disappointing. I wonder if we could perhaps put in informative encouraging, them to follow through, with the measures that they state they intend to do.
You can certainly ask for an informative to do that. It is up to the developer to build how he wants to, but as long as it's in accordance with the building regulations, which have changed recently. Actually, they've got a little bit tougher. They're okay, but I think most developers now are looking to go a little bit beyond where they used to. But yeah, we can put an informative on, but it doesn't hold any weight.
you want to transfer those 4 to the as informatives or a single informative? Andrew?
Sorry, repeat that.
Would you like those 4 points in 74 to be transferred to as informative?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. Is it members happy with that? It's already in the report. Okay. Is that the end of your questions? Yep. Anyone else wishing to speak? Carl.
Thank you. I just want to make a quick point. It isn't a planning issue, the road, but I think one of the problems with these private kind of infill developments like this is you get those unadopted roads become a problem, and I think there's quite a few in my ward. I think here it seems to be a problem because I know you said the certificate B was served on the owner, which is the developer, and yet it's the residents who are paying for the upkeep. So the person making a decision on whether this kind of goes ahead, really, if we say yes, is not going to be the people paying for the upkeep of the road. But that's obviously a civil matter, as you say. The only other point I want to make is because it's happened in a previous application recently. This is a 3-story building. This kind of 2-story plus a loft level, or 2 and an extension in the loft. This is 3 stories. I know the roof's very big. It's nearly double the height from the eaves. So it's a 3-story building. And I think because our policy says, it should be like development must be appropriate to the height and the character of the area, because most of it's 2-story here with some bungalows with loft extensions. I think developers try to market these, in the basis that we can get it through and make it sound like it's similar. But our policy talks about heights. So I'm interested in what the heights of the surrounding properties are on Coleman's Moor Road, because I suspect some are similar, but I think most aren't. So I'm just interested to know, because it talks about it fitting into the street scene. And it certainly does fit. If you look at the photo in your presentation, Aldi, there's one that looks right down the new houses, the new private road, and there's a house right at the end that looks identical to this one. So obviously it's similar to that, but I'm more interested on the street scene and the actual houses down the road. How is this in comparison to those?
I mean, it clearly is higher than the properties to the west, that's for sure. But as the report states, I mean, their design and access statement has mentioned that they want the dwellings to complement what was on the Loddon development, the Loddon Gardens development. And obviously in the report you can see that they're going forward with a design which is similar to plots 4 and 5, but also given the orientation that its front elevation is north facing, not essentially to the south, which is technically the front of Coleman's Moor Lane. I don't think the height in comparison to the rest is detrimental in this case.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think had this been on its own without that little infill development there with similar size houses, I'd be a bit worried about it. But I think it would be impossible for us to consider refusing it on the basis of that when there's houses next door to it the same size. So yeah, thanks.
And the same number of floors, however you measure it. Stephen, do you want to come back? I think
I was just going to make the point that Carl made right at the end, when he effectively acknowledged that there wasn't much we could do about it because of the other dwellings nearby that are essentially very similar in character and height.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else? No, we'll turn to Bill.
Yeah, just to say that if you look at the drawing on page 65, to the right of the development, I think it's to the north, is Bridges Resource Centre, which I think is almost a 3-story building as well. So it's not too far away.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to the recommendation on page 58. There are no updates, I think, in the supplementary planning agenda. So can I see those in favour of approving this?
Plus the informative, Chairman.
Plus the informative, thank you, Angus. So those 4 sentences copied over to them as a single informative, I think. But, so those in favour, please show.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Can I make one more comment?
I'm just taking a vote. I'm just taking the vote. Can you those in favour, please? Thank you. That is approved. Bill? You abstaining, Bill? Thank you. So that's 8 for 1 abstention. Mr. McKinney, you wanted to say something?
Sorry, a problem with the mute button. I don't agree with the 6 metre reversing of a vehicle. If you actually look at the plot, where they've got a dedicated, visitor parking space, number 1, Loddon Gardens restricts the view, creating a safety concern on the estate. No, I don't think that's actually a civil matter. That's a planning matter.
Okay, we take your point.
Thank you.
Note your point. So that's approved, and we move on to the last one, which is Liberty House, Strandway, Lower Early, number 213437, page 93. Simon Taylor. Good evening, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I think the screen should be up now. I think, yes, it is. 213457 relates to a parcel of private open space adjacent to the Liberty of Early House, which is shown here on to the west of the red line area. The site and both sites are owned by the Reading Almshouse Trust, which is a charity operating almshouses in Reading Borough Council and Woking Borough Council. This site here was recently approved at Planning Committee in 2019 for approval for a change of use from an aged care facility to 36 affordable 1 and 2 bedroom units. This application has been implemented and residents have moved in. The subject site is proposed for 3 residential flat buildings, 6 units in each, 2 stories in height. 3 units to each floor of the building. This is a typical floor plan to the buildings. And you'll see here, this is the street scene. The buildings are linked attached only insofar as there's an element of pedestrian cover linking each of the buildings. The street scene down below here. I'll just show you the site. That's the open space to the site. The residents, there's 1 property to the east. There's the Liberty of Early House to the west. That's the property to the east, closer up. There's the property opposite. This is the typical street scene. So this is taken looking mostly west from opposite one of the access points proposed onto the site. And this is the pathway to the rear. I'll just revert back to the aerial view. Cupbush Lane, which is a pedestrian and cycle only route along the rear of the site. The proposal is for 35% affordable housing, and at this point I'll refer to the members' update, which does clarify a discrepancy in the report. The report makes clear that it's 100% affordable housing. That is the intention of the applicant, to deliver 100% affordable housing, but the proposal here is for 35%, which is compliant. It's in the form of one of the buildings being made affordable housing. So 6 units plus commuted sum of some £20,000 to cover the 0.3, which would bring it to 35%. So Reading's Almshouse Trust have no intention not to deliver 100%. They have done this approach to secure finance, and I'd revert to the applicant when he is to speak, if he needs to elaborate on that point in any way. Further to that point, the report does make mention that it is not still liable because it is 100% affordable housing. That would not necessarily be the case. There is a charitable exemption is applied if they're delivering development for charitable purposes, and whether if they were to deliver it as market housing, then they would be subject to SIL. So I don't think it's their intention not to deliver the affordable housing. Objections have been received from Early Town Council, from the ward member and 16 surrounding properties. The majority of them are surrounding the site, so there's no in-principle objection to the development of the site. I think the concerns from them stem largely from the character and the density and the design of the development. In the report, you'll find that it is no real concern raised with the layout of the siting or the design of the development. It's three essentially detached flat buildings that conform to the character of the area. They're aligned in the building line. They relate to the site. A lot of the objections also raised an issue with the lack of parking. A lot of that stems from issues with the Liberty Valley House. They were provided with 18 parking spaces unallocated for a 36-unit development. That is compliant with council's policy. The anecdotal evidence from residents is that there's a lot of on-street parking arising from that. This proposal involves 18 parking spaces for 18 units. So there is effectively double, whereas before it was half a space per unit. This is one space per unit. So it's effectively double compliant in terms of the requirements. The other issue is neighbour amenity. The site does allow a development to be implemented in full compliance with the standards in the Borough Design Guide. So I don't think there's any real concern. There's sufficient setbacks to the property to the east. There's no real overlooking. It complies with all the standards there. Objections were also received from the Drainage Officer and Crime Prevention Officer at Thames Valley Police. They are conditioned to be resolved. Moving to the conditions, there's standard pre-commencement conditions, with the only real additional conditions being a requirement for a construction management plan and a communication plan. I think that I felt that was imperative because of the resident concerns and construction issues that might arise during that process. We need cycle parking details and scooter details to be revised, and as well as security and accessibility measures to be revised in due course. Subject to those amendments, the proposal is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Simon. We have three speakers. First of all, Alfred Wojciech, please. Mr. Wojciech.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair and councillors. Thank you. Alongside myself, there was a total of 16 objections which were submitted by residents immediately adjoining, living in proximity to or directly opposite the proposed development, as well as there being an objection lodged by Early Town Council. There's not one submission of support for this development, may I stress. The design's out of character and the stylistic context doesn't resemble the existing housing stock in the local area or of Liberty House itself. The roof design is a cross-gable design and not box-gable design like other buildings locally. Liberty House is also a purpose-built home for multiple occupation, and the new development resembles houses of multiple occupation and not a home like Liberty House. It's totally inconsistent with the housing stock in the area, but local residents would accept a single building, not multiple HMOs. Two new access points are being proposed on an S-bend, which introduces traffic hazards and adds accident risks onto Strand Way that never existed previously. This is out of character with Strand Way, as no other house has a driveway opposite another driveway on the road. The S-bend in the road where the new access points are proposed is a blind corner after the council granted planning permission to number 20 to move the fence to the pavement line and will affect 7 houses directly. Residents objected to this in April 2021 during RAC's consultation period, and residents recommended that car parking is provided at the rear, not at the front, and that an internal roadway is constructed within the grounds to the existing Liberty House access point on Strand Way. There's plenty of space in the grounds for such an internal roadway. This proposal introduces unwelcome traffic problems, and the safety is being hugely compromised on this S-bend. When Liberty House was converted into almshouses, residents were also assured that there'll be no additional road parking for the residents by the trustees at this time. That isn't the case. There's considerable additional road parking, as some residents have 2 vehicles, and that is the case. There's no guarantee that the new development won't attract additional road parking opposite existing driveways, creating more road hazards. There's also been a large increase in road traffic since they converted to almshouses compared to the previous 30 years. No consideration has also been given to net zero, COP26, or WBC's Let's Talk Climate project. No EV charging points are shown, no AL ground source heat pumps are shown, and the cross-gable roof design doesn't allow for PV panel installation. Also, no battery storage bank is shown. Additional light pollution from the development will directly affect one resident who's a member of the British Astronomical Association with telescopes in his garden and undertakes professional research for the association in the southern skies, which will development will prevent its valuable research affecting the association, the worldwide astronomical scientific community, including institutions such as NASA, etc., and probably stop his professional activities, which is totally unreasonable. There's an elderly lady living directly opposite in number 20, as shown on the photographs, and vehicles exiting at night from the proposed development with their lights on, as well as the shutting of car doors and the security lights going on and off, will negatively affect her sleep and mental health. The car park needs to be relocated to the rear of the development with an internal driveway constructed to the existing Liberty House access point. She'll also lose privacy as the development will look directly into her ground floor bedroom, bathroom and lounge windows and into her garden. To mitigate this loss of privacy, planting of high hedgerow is essential along Strandway fence line, and no new access points are allowed to be constructed on Strandway. These objections also formally raised to Reading Almshouse Charity in April.
Could you come to a conclusion, please?
Yeah.
Exceed you just 3 minutes.
Yeah, none of the objections were considered or included as part of the design submission. Residents were disregarded, and the council also didn't send out formal planning notifications to affected residents of procedural non-conformity in the application process. Yet, for Lidl, we got.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you very much. We're going to move to the next speaker, who's John Cornwell. Sorry, the agent. Good evening. I think you're muted.
Hello, Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much, Chairman, for giving me this opportunity. My name is John Cornwell. I'm the agent for this application. I'm a chartered town planner and I'm also one of the trustees of the Reading Almshouse Charity, so I do have skin in the game. I have to tell you that I am stunned by the last speaker's allegations. Most of them are simply wrong. These are not HMOs that are being proposed. These are small, affordable flats that are totally in line with your own council's housing strategy, and which identifies that single bedroom flats for affordable flats are what are needed in this area above all else. I just don't know where to start. I mean, is it right that this application could be refused because an astronomer lives next door? I put it to you. Is it sensible for an astronomer with telescopes to live in the middle of Lower Early? I'm left speechless. This charity has been around for more than 300 years. It is a local charity. Its area of remit is Wokingham and Reading boroughs and the western urban areas of West Berkshire, effectively. And what it does is its sole remit is to provide housing for those in need, what we today call affordable housing. Interestingly, and it's a material consideration, the right to buy legislation doesn't apply to almshouses in the same way that it does to housing associations. So that these flats, which are required and needed, will remain available to affordable and to rent into the foreseeable future, and they won't disappear off into market housing through the right to buy legislation. I'm not going to repeat everything that the planning officer said. His report is remarkably full. At the outset, when we originally purchased before we purchased Liberty House and this land, your officer gave a very detailed and helpful and unequivocal planning advice on the way that this site should be developed. We followed that advice absolutely to the letter. And that's why the report is so positive. This development meets all national and local planning standards and policies. And as you read from the report, I think Chairman, that's all I would wish to say at this stage. I'm very happy to take questions from members if they have any points of clarification, but I would hope that members would look favourably on this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cornwell. Lastly, Councillor David Hare, who's the local ward member, who's here in the chamber.
Thank you. As many people have said, the trustees of Liberty House seem to have not given any thought to the other residents living in Strandway, Regent's Close. And that, I believe, from an almshouse is very sad. While I agree a build may be made on this site, my main objection is the locations of the two access points. One appears to be fully opposite the property and their access, the other opposite a drive for 3 houses. These access points are going to cause problems for entrance and exit. Usage of the access points on a curved section of Strand Way, which is not a wide road, and therefore, because it's a curved section, there's reduced visibility, is an accident waiting to happen, especially, as is expected, if residents park on the road. Indeed, the eastern set of flats has no parking incorporated within the building, so people will park on the road even if there's parking somewhere else. I'm also concerned that the current plans do not seem to have considered EV charging points, heat pump provision, solar panels, battery storage, etc. Although I talked to the chair and suggested these. Indeed, I suggested the Passive Plus house build, positive for residents and showing care for the environment. For a 21st century approach for a net zero future, this build ticks few boxes. The building does not appear to be in keeping with Liberty or the other houses on Strand Way. If 3 units are proposed, and environmentally I believe one would be far more energy efficient, there must be much more of a mirror of the housing already on the road. As has been said, one of the residents of Strand Way at the moment is a member of the British Astronomical Association and uses his telescope to do research on behalf of BAA. That will be wiped out. I know that isn't a planning consideration, but I still believe it's a great shame. I consider that a development may well be needed here, but this development is overbearing, does not fit the street scene, be out of scale with the local area with inappropriate entrance and exits. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try to clear up some of the points made by the first speaker. The question of whether these are HMOs, could you just clarify on that point, please?
No, they won't be HMOs in any way. It's a separate definition for an HMO to a. This is just a unit sold at an affordable rate.
Thank you. Could you give us a general view on various environmental points such as net zero, COP26, why they're not addressed in this application?
I guess this kind of issue does seem to crop up on a lot of the applications. Our local plan is effectively behind current standards. There is a condition requiring an energy statement to reduce energy consumption by 10%. It would be hoped that it would be beyond that. It is fairly easy to achieve more than 10% in today's climate. It does not, the highways officer did not insist on EV charging for this site because of it being an affordable scheme. That same condition, the carbon condition, does allow that opportunity to bring EV charging forward because I believe it'd be in the interests of the applicant to do so. But beyond that, there is no sustainable measures coming forward as part of this application, but it will be addressed at condition stage.
And thirdly, the question of overspill car parking, which apparently already a problem for Liberty Hall. But this application, if it were implemented, exacerbate that problem.
From recollection, I dealt with the application for the adjacent site in 2019, and there was concern with the parking rate being 0.5 space per unit. When I visited the site, I didn't notice any on-street parking. I'm not suggesting the residents are making something up, so there may well be on-street parking occurring. This development has effectively doubled the amount for the provision per unit. So if there is any issue in the existing site, I don't believe it'll be the case here. Regardless of all that, it is fully compliant and in excess of the policy requirements. So I don't see there's much more that members can really insist on in terms of the on-site parking.
Thank you. David, you had your hand up.
Yeah, as I live in Strandway, can I just say that there are certainly in the evening and often during the day, at least 8 or 9 cars parked outside Liberty House, most days.
Okay, thank you for that. Andrew, you're the local member, so I come to you first, and then we've got Carl and Stephen. Carl, Stephen, Agrush.
Thank you. I'd like to ask questions on 3 issues, and I'll ask each question separately. So the first theme relates to flooding and drainage. On page 123, the drainage officer's objection is noted with the case officer's comment. However, this does not warrant refusal, as there's an absence of detail rather than unsatisfactory impact. I appreciate the detail required is stated in fairly lengthy condition number 7. Can we be confident that all of the measures in that condition would be adequate to deal with flood risks, including from surface water? And could this also be answered with reference to Thames Water's comment seeking to minimise discharge into the public sewer? Do officers know whether Thames Water's comment is a result of existing capacity issues and or flooding in the neighbourhood? And finally, on this issue, on page 123, the case officer writes, wastewater capacity is viewed as satisfactory. Was this also the view of the drainage officer?
The drainage officers raised objection because there was a lack of detail. The MPPF requires a sequential approach that hadn't occurred as part of this planning application. What the condition will do is apply that sequential approach, and the site, there's nothing unusual about the site. It's a greenfield site. There's no flooding or surface water issues with it. There is ample soft landscaping retained on the site for it to ensure that there's no runoff increase beyond what already occurs. So I didn't feel it necessary to maintain that objection on those grounds, because the condition I'm absolutely certain will address on-site retention of that, whether they do soakways. I don't envisage that there'll be a connection to the sewer required, because you've got so much open space left on the site. Thames Water's comments to the application are fairly standard. There's nothing out of the ordinary for their submission. They apply that kind of comment to most applications. It marries with the drainage officer's comments that the sequential approach should address on-site retention rather than directing it to the sewer. And finally, the wastewater is a matter for Thames Water, so drainage officer would not comment on that because it's not a council asset.
Okay, thanks for those answers. I think I've understood those. My second question is that it is rare to have an opportunity like this to secure a significant amount of affordable housing of this type in one location. I was a little concerned, however, to read on page 111, this will ensure, this is a direct quote, this will ensure the accommodation will remain for affordable rent into the foreseeable future. Can officers confirm that any change to this arrangement, either by Reading Almshouse Charity or any future owner, would require a new planning application that would be treated as a major application requiring a planning committee decision? So I guess what I'm getting at here is what my fear might be, that at some point, in the future, there could be a request, necessity, to change the format of ownership away from 100% affordable. Should that happen, okay, can we be absolutely assured that that would have to come back, to planning?
The application would be subject to a legal agreement securing the 6 units as affordable housing. If they alter that delivery, then we're dealing with a new legal agreement. So that would have implications for the planning application. I'd have to revert to Lindsay on this, but I don't think you can change the legal agreement without it affecting the merits of the planning application. Or it would require it to come back to committee at some stage, I presume.
If I could just probe that a little bit more, the Reading Almshouse Charity have said, that their intention is to retain this, all the units as as affordable housing, and I think that's really admirable, and a wonderful opportunity. But my question, I'm really concerned, particularly now that we're told that only 6 of the homes will be required to be affordable, so the other homes would not. My concern is that some of us might treat the application differently, if it was not all 100% affordable. Yeah. And if it was not to be the case, at some point in the future, it might be decades from now, it seems to be that wouldn't necessarily have to come back, to a planning committee, particularly since now 12 of the homes do not need to be affordable.
I think I might stress a point on the 6 versus 18 affordable housing. It is operated by Reading Almshouses Trust, so they're a charity. So if they're not delivering in accordance with their charter in terms of being a charity, then they have problems there. So I don't envisage there to be any issue with them themselves delivering 100% affordable housing at some point at completion of the entire development. I guess there's nothing stopping them from selling the site on. The legal agreement, as I understand it, would go with the site, and the wording of the legal agreement would allow it to be sold on. In answer to your question about whether or not the affordable housing would then become market housing, it's secured in the legal agreement, so we need to amend the legal agreement, and I don't know the exact answer about whether or not that has to come back to planning committee. I'm sorry.
Chairman, if I may help with the legal agreement side, if that would be of assistance to Councillor Mickleborough.
Yes, please.
With the agreement itself, the section 106, there would be, my understanding, a requirement to secure the 6 dwellings, I believe it is, as affordable housing, and any amendment to that would need to go through the usual channels for a deed of variation to be entered into. The section 106 wouldn't be securing 100% affordable housing on the site. It would be the 6 that the planning officer and the affordable housing officers have approved this or recommended this for approval on that basis.
Okay, I think I've probably asked sufficient questions on that issue. My final question stroke comment is in relation to carbon reduction measures. I am puzzled that an energy statement regarding decentralised renewable and or low carbon sources will need to be submitted, but on page 121, the Highways Officer states that they would have expected provision of EV charging points, but they're not required, as this is all affordable housing. I don't recall this having been stated in relation to other planning applications, where, for instance, 35% of housing is affordable, and yet we do impose requirements with regard to EV charging points. So I'm quite puzzled, as to why this issue has cropped up here, but may not, seem to have applied many times before in relation to affordable housing. So notwithstanding those comments, could the committee consider an informative expressing a strong desire for EV charging points? And as an aside, would officers know if there are any EV charging points in the existing car park at Liberty House?
The highways comments based on the 2019 application next door, so it wasn't insisted then. I would add that the EV charging has moved on substantially since that application, and that's only 2 years ago. I've noted the highways comments, but I'm quite. My intention is for condition 13 to hopefully encompass that. I think it'd be a disappointment for the developer to not incorporate it into the design. So conditions 13 is fairly open-ended in terms of incorporating that. Beyond that, there's still no local plan policy requirement for the EV charging to be implemented.
I'm just wondering whether we would wish to consider an informative on the EV charging points.
Can we do that as to encourage? Anyone object to such an informative being added if we approve this? No? Okay. That's in then.
Chris, sorry, just adding, excuse me, building regs has changed slightly, and there is a requirement for EV charging moving forward on all units. So they would have to do meet a, I don't know what the requirement is, but they would have to meet an on-site EV charging regime on the site with any development.
So the informative could say that, just pointing out that this is actually a requirement then.
Yeah, it could state that they need to meet the building regs, and that will require some EV charging.
Okay, thanks. I'm happy with that. Carl.
Thank you. When I first looked at this, when we got it last week, I was looking at the plan, which is on page 128. And I noticed, as this is kind of a joint site pretty much with Liberty House, as it seems, obviously it's a separate site in terms of red lines, but I just noticed that the three buildings, kind of how they were shoved over to the right. And I kind of thought, that just got me thinking about why it's built that way. You own the whole site. There's no reason why those buildings couldn't be slightly closer to Liberty House. Obviously it's just that's their decision of design, and I kind of thought nothing of it. But I was thinking there are quite a few objections about it being overbearing, about it being, I think the people at number 9 have complained about it being too close. It is inside the limits in terms of its 2 meters, that's fine. But the gap between the building nearest to Liberty House and Liberty House is 12 meters. Again, it was kind of, why is it shoved over to one side? I couldn't quite understand that. And then maybe today we've got a reason. Because I want somebody to make this make sense. Andrew touched on it and said he wouldn't go any further with the questions, which I think was a good idea because I had a lot on them. The affordable housing. The applicant relies heavily on this period development of 100% affordable housing. And I remember the previous application, which I think I voted for, which did the same. And I thought that was a really useful thing. We obviously need affordable housing. A lot of us have been banging the drum for it for years. And here's the chance to get, as the agent said, a lot of 1-bedroom affordable houses. That's brilliant. So they're relying on that. The dwelling mix, which is referred to on page 117 of the agenda, refers to this proposal as a clear departure from policy CP5 in terms of the dwelling mix, because obviously it's nearly all 1-bedroom flats. But it balances that by pointing out it's 100% affordable. So, and that it's consistent with the previous scheme. And the point I want to make is that that's not the case anymore. So I can't, somebody needs to make me understand why that's okay now, because that's changed. And the last point on affordable housing that really kind of nails this shut for me, that I don't understand it, is they're intending to make this 100% affordable housing at some point, but aren't now, and are paying £20,000 for the privilege of not doing something they fully intend to do. And in fact, what the report says is something that's not to be questioned. I don't know, have they got money to throw away? But that seems a bit strange to me. They intend to make it 100% affordable housing. You wouldn't need to pay £20,000 for 0.3 in lieu of the bit that you're not providing. I just don't get it. So somebody needs to explain that to me, really. And, you know, when we sit here and we kind of have the planning balance on what we think, you know, my balance pretty much was, this is affordable housing, we need this. Yeah, I can see there's some problems in Strandway. And I think on balance, I was leaning towards supporting it. But now hearing what I've heard today about the affordable housing, I'm leaning the other way. So somebody needs to explain that to me, I think. I've got other things to talk about, but I'll stop there because we need to get to the bottom of that, I think.
Why didn't they make 7 affordable instead of 6?
Well, I mean, I can see how it's why each building is 6. So I can see why that was a neat thing for them to do. But of course, if you're going to make them affordable and sell this site on, you wouldn't want to be having 7, would you? With 6 in one and one other affordable house in another one of the properties. So again, I mean, it's absolute speculation on my part, but it just leads me more to thinking why? Why would they do that?
Okay. Simon?
I think I'll address citing first. The reasoning I consider for where it's cited is because the Liberty of Early House is designed in such a way that it opens, there's units opening onto the side of the building. So that, if I share the plans again for you, we'll get there, sorry. So building A is set back 12 metres from that. The eastern elevation of Liberty of Early House is 2 stories. So there's 6 units on each floor looking out onto this site. So there is a need to be increased separation along those, in between those 2 buildings. Whereas this, number 9, is only a single dwelling and it has a side elevation. So the side elevations reflect side elevations. And as you noted, Carla, it is in excess of the requirement of 1 metre. So I don't think there's an issue with the level of separation there. Dealing with affordable housing, I'll admit there was the documentation submitted with the application refers to 100%. There was a draft unilateral undertaking submitted with the application that refers to delivering 6 of the units. So in my view, the documentation was slightly misleading, but regardless of all that, the policy is still policy compliant. So I don't think there's much avenue for the council to oppose the development because it's not more than policy compliant. I'd stress that they're still delivering their requirements, and so there's no reason for the council to oppose the development on those grounds. And I'll reiterate another point I've already made several times before. It is a Reading's Armed House charity. They operate 36 units next door. Their charter and the way they operate isn't to deliver market housing. It's purely to secure the finance from the bank to allow the development to occur. So the alternative would be, if we were to oppose the development, make it 100% affordable housing by legal agreement, then the bank is not would not be interested in, may not be interested in delivering the finance for the development, and it doesn't come up at all. And then we're left with a situation where there's no affordable housing being delivered because there's no development. So that, my view was that regardless of whether it's 100% or 40%, we're still getting a good outcome for the site. I do note there's one other comment, I think, apologies if I've missed anything else, but the dwelling mix, primarily the 1 and 2 bedroom units, was considered perfectly reasonable in this situation because of the same approach applied for Liberty of Early House, and that was considered a planning committee as well. 1 and 2 bedroom units, predominantly 1 bedroom units. I think there's 30 out of 36 in that site was considered acceptable because of the type of accommodation they're providing and the type of client that they're dealing with.
Yeah, thanks for that, Simon. Yeah, on the dwelling mix, yeah, I agree. I personally think that the housing market assessment is way out of date anyway, and 1 and 2 is what we need to be doing the most of anyway. So it's not that I was unhappy with the dwelling mix. I was just it was being relied on, saying it was a clear departure, but then relying on the fact it was 100% affordable, which of course it's not anymore. I guess I have to accept the fact that it's policy compliant. I just find it very, very strange. This is how they would do it. It seems a waste of money, and sees it's open to kind of, they're not HMOs, but they're open to becoming market properties, aren't they? Which is not what we would like to see, really. I just want to make one other kind of point, question, really. This is originally privately owned space, as it said, privately owned open space, I think it says. And there was an original planning requirement for it to be there in when I think the house was originally built in 1989. And it seems to be that that's been extinguished in some way, that requirement. So I'd just be interested to know how that actually happened. It seems to kind of imply that the previous application, which I think I voted for on Liberty House, removed that. But this site wasn't in the red line for that. So I'd just be interested to know how that's gone, because I'm thinking about the Swallows Meadow thing that we refused recently, and how we were relying on an open space condition from 1977, and here's one from 1989 that seems to have just disappeared in a puff of smoke. So I'd just be interested to know where that's gone.
I'm just trying to find my reference to that, but my understanding is that it wasn't to be required for public open space, and that's the reason why it's fenced off. So I've considered this application merely as effectively a change of use from open space to residential accommodation. Yeah, so there's nothing more beyond that. There's no loss loss of benefit to the public in that way.
Okay, thanks.
David.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but certainly talking to some of the trustees about the fact that it's not going to be all affordable housing, they said that they might have to charge market rate for some of it so that they can afford to pay it off the bank. Or they said they might sell one unit, the eastern unit, to a housing association that they could afford the bills as well. So they are thinking, we haven't got enough money to do all this at the moment, therefore we're going to make sure that we have got enough money by making it only 6. So that's why that has, and I feel like you, rather aggrieved at that, but I don't think there's an awful lot we can do.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I mean, do need to stick ultimately to planning policy. Stephen.
Thank you, Chris. Quite a few of the issues I was going to raise have been raised and raised very effectively. And so I don't think there's any need for me now to talk about drainage or really at any length about affordable housing, although I still feel uncomfortable that we've seen a reduction effectively of what appeared to be an offer 100% down to something much, much less. But I think I can now see the logic of that, and I can see this may be the only way we're going to be able to provide even that smaller amount of affordable housing. I want to concentrate, if I may, on 2 other issues. Andrew highlighted the objection from drainage. There's also an objection from crime prevention. Simon, you've acknowledged and addressed some of those objections, but I think you've acknowledged but decided you don't need to address the point made about surveillance. And I wonder whether you might be able to comment on that. But before I give you that opportunity, if I can raise another point, my final point, the the resident who was the first public speaker on this application did talk about headlight spillage affecting houses on Strand Way. And it does look, if we go back to the plan on page 128, which Carl was referring to, the car park in front of block B, the entrance and exit point is pretty close to number 20 opposite. And in hours of darkness, vehicles leaving the site will undoubtedly be causing some light spillage in the direction of number 20. And I wonder whether we are able adequately to address that problem.
I've just shared the photo of the neighbouring property, so that's opposite one of the access points. I don't believe headlight glare to be an issue there. The fence being obscuring most of the headlight glare, which is well below or at about 1 metre above ground level. So I don't, in my view, think there is an issue with headlight glare. Dealing with the crime prevention, my experience with the crime prevention officer is that they are fairly thorough in terms of their assessment of the application. They do pick up a fair few things. With the design, they generally don't have don't raise no objection to anything. So I'll reword that. They generally find objection to most aspects in a development, some aspects in a development. So I've considered the surveillance. I think the issue that they've raised is in relation to the lack of habitable windows to the side of the building near the entrances. I didn't think that was a major issue, given the length of the access through that point, and generally the residents would be accessing that point. I didn't agree with the reasoning for that, so I've left that as is.
Sorry, didn't realise you'd finished. Thank you. Stephen, did you want to come back?
I think that's an adequate answer.
Thank you. Rochelle?
As someone who actually worked for NASA for a few years, I can't imagine the telescope at this person's house would having major effect on the space program in any way, shape, or form. And with the light spillage in the area anyway already, I can't imagine a whole lot. He may be just an amateur astronomer that he enjoys doing it, but if you really want technical ones, it would have to be out in a much less light pollution area. I do like the idea of infrastructure for EV for future charging points. I'd like to see the infrastructure put in so they can put charging points in the future. We've talked about plug and play, basically plug it in when you need it, rather than building them all in right now, and at least having the infrastructure in so they don't have to dig up the car park to put it back in afterwards. And I agree with at least two of my colleagues here that I'd rather see 100% affordable homes, because we really desperately need them in Wokingham. But I understand that we can't do that necessarily to the economics in this particular case, but I would still rather see that. And using the NASA idea as I don't think NASA is very dependent on this one particular astronomer.
Thank you. Sam.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, just echoing a number of points made today, re the EV charging points. I think even if we can't have them all, I think having the infrastructure in place would be great. But also in line with the green strategy, it mentions an issue with the cycle store being quite some distance from the flat buildings. I think adjacent to the rear pathway, which is quite some distance from the buildings and could reduce its usage somewhat. So just keen to see if there's any thought being put in to bring that closer to the buildings, because we're trying to encourage the residents to cycle more.
The theory behind the location is because it's readily accessible to the path, but the crime prevention officer, who I agree with in this case, is that it effectively makes it much easier for people to steal from that cycle store. So condition 9 does require revised details, and so we'll negotiate a more appropriate location on the site. Whether that involves 3 separate stores for the 3 buildings, it will be subject to further detail.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, many of my points have been covered already. Just one comment and one question. The comment was the objector commenting that the car parks would be better placed to the rear. Now, whether or not that's true, that's not the application that we've got to deal with today. So I think that one is something we have to set aside. But going back to biodiversity, page 96, we seem, and we had this on a previous application this evening, to be just looking at some pretty minor sort of things on site. Now, I know it is always preferable to do any enhancements on site, but was there any consideration of contributions to off-site biodiversity to make it something more substantial, even though 10% may not be actually applicable yet?
Yes, that's the primary reason why we didn't pursue any further requirements, because there's no legislative requirement for that. I know it's a lawn, it's a mown lawn at the moment, so there's a lack of real diversity for it. So I felt that condition 6 was about as far as we were entitled to go in terms of securing additional biodiversity for the site.
Thank you. The applicant in listening may be able to help us there later, but I accept that.
Pauline.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, trying to escape from this mask. I've got a couple of questions, actually. Firstly, looking at this plan, those 2 footpaths that go onto Cutbush Lane, I don't recall them being there at the moment. I thought there was a fence along there. Yeah, exactly. So are these new accesses? Have they got right of access through that? I don't think that's a current access. That was my first question. Second question was following David's point about the and Carl's point about the sill. Did I hear right at the beginning that if it was 100% affordable, there was no liability for sill, but if it wasn't, then there was a liability for sill? Bearing in mind what David just said, which was of course hearsay, that they might have to sell one in order to be able to afford to build the others. What does that do retrospectively to the sill? Does the council then get some sill where previously it wouldn't? Or could this be used as a sill avoidance scheme, i.e. saying one thing and then doing something slightly different? Thank you.
Yeah, so the plan on page 126, 128 and 129 does show 2 access points. One's outside the red line area, so that's out behind Liberty Valley House. The other one is a proposed access, as far as I'm aware. I did walk along Cutbush Lane and I didn't notice any access point through there. It is fairly well vegetated at the moment. Dealing with sill, if it is at the moment, they would need to submit a sill exemption form that would be reviewed after the planning permission is granted. If it is 100% affordable housing, it is not liable for sill. If it is 35% sill, affordable housing, the rest is liable for sill, but there is a separate provision that it can be exempt if it's operated by a charitable organisation for charitable purposes, and that's not the exact wording, but it would effectively require them to deliver the remainder of the housing, is my understanding, deliver the remainder of the housing as for a charitable purpose. I'm not sure whether the market housing would be able to achieve that. I'm not sure whether they're selling 1 or 2 units as market housing to offset losses on the rest of the development. I'm not sure. I'd revert to Lindsay here, but I think there may be an opportunity in the legal agreement to secure an arrangement where down the track, if there was some kind of change to the situation, that would be still liable. much the same way still requirements you require self-build exemption to be lived in by the owner claiming the self-build exemption for the 3 years afterwards.
Thank you. I'd be keen to see something like that be put in place so that we don't end up with a scheme that looks like affordable that suddenly becomes partly affordable and is used as a way of avoiding SIL. Not that I'm suggesting the current applicant is doing that, but there's nothing to see what happens in the future. So if we could put that in the legal agreement, that would be very good. I don't think either of those public rights of way or rights of way or paths are rights of way at the moment. I think there's a fence along there. So I'm not quite sure why we're allowing access onto Cutbush Lane. It's not current right of way, and I'm not quite sure why you would want people potentially going backwards and forwards through the site either.
Sorry, to clarify, I have assessed it as a private access onto the site. It's not intended as a right of way through the site for other members of the public.
So how would you stop that?
In the same way that you could access the other site or access the site from Strandway, it would be fenced. My understanding would be a fence, but beyond that, if they chose to go through the fence or through the gate, then that could occur, I guess. But
I'm not sure. I'd be interested in other members who know the area well, but I would have suggested that we wouldn't necessarily want that to be a place that people could go backwards and forwards through happily in order to find a nice little shortcut into Strandway. And I would suggest that we maybe condition it to some form of locked gate or something like that, so that it's only usable by residents.
But it's not in the red line, is it? It's can't condition that.
Well, it's got to be in the red line because it's a change.
But you're talking about this right at the bottom.
I'm talking about two
B.
paths that go into Cutbush Lane, one from the back of Liberty Valley House and one from number B, where the bike store is. I don't think either of those current accesses exist at the moment, as far as I can remember.
Can
Somebody help me?
The one behind Liberty does exist. There is a bridge there, but it is a locked gate, which is permanently locked.
That's
and
my view.
I think that this would be stupid because it would give access and egress to people who might be thieving and throwing things like that. So I think that is a no-no, totally.
Thank you, David. I think I agree with you.
Let's go, Andrew.
And I would like to add also a consideration that at least some of the residents of Liberty House are vulnerable. And I think that that is also a very, very significant consideration should there be access from Cutbush Lane. I'd be very much against providing access from Cutbush Lane.
So could Connor help us with how we achieve that?
Well, I mean, the simple way to overcome it is to have a additional condition stating the gates can be locked if there is an access. There's emergency purposes only, or.
Well, could I propose that, please?
Yep, if that's in order.
Could I just say that just what it does do, obviously, is Cutbush Lane there is quite a good, well cycled walked route, apparently, from our understanding, and it would just provide obviously that easier, more sustainable connection to walking, cycling. I understand the points you're making, and they're completely valid, but I think just from that point of view as well, it is quite a, rather than following along the road, getting round to that cycle route, it would provide obviously access for the residents onto that facility. That was the.
Sorry, I understand what you mean, Chris. I think my concern is that it also provides access to people up to no good, backwards and forwards between a site which, as Andrew said, has got vulnerable people in it, and potentially the ability to steal whatever and take a fast exit onto Cutbush Lane.
Yeah,
I think I'd prefer on balance for it to be locked.
Yeah, the drawing does show gates, and obviously, yeah, if the gates could be managed in some way, if they can't, then yeah, I do understand your point that it's open to anybody. But yeah, from my point of view and the team, we were looking at it. We looked at it from a sustainability axis. It's quite a nice route out, and obviously also leads to the bus stop out further to the east. But
Six and one and half a dozen to the bus stop. It's just as easy to walk along Strandway.
It is, yeah. It's just that desire aspect. But no, fully appreciate the point you're making. But I just wanted you to be clear that's how we were taking the view of a sustainability approach.
Angus.
Sorry, I'll just jump in. Condition 14 does require further details on security grounds for other matters that the crime prevention officer has raised, so it could easily be accommodated in that condition.
Thank you. So could I formally propose that we actually provide some sort of condition that insists that those gates are secure in some way, so that members of the public can't use it to go backwards and forwards?
Well, this is a dilemma, isn't it? You're asking us to make a decision on the fly. I don't have enough
No,
information.
those current
both sides.
No, those current gates are not currently accessible. There is nothing on the plan that says that they will not be accessible in future. And they're not in the red line, so I'm not quite sure how we're changing the right of way when it's not in the red line anyway.
I think, could I just ask a question just for clarity? If the gates were locked or there wasn't gates there, would the scheme still be acceptable from a highways point of view?
Sorry, yes, I couldn't find my mic button. Yeah, no, Connor, it would be. Obviously, that's just an added benefit that it's there, but obviously you have got that access, and as Pauline highlighted, it probably wouldn't take that much different to walk you out to the bus stop, and obviously you can adequately cycle along the road as well, if deemed suitable or made that choice to do so.
Let me get some more views, Angus.
Thank you, Chairman. Surely it is desirable for the residents there to have the option of going on a far more sustainable and pleasant route by using Cutbush Lane. And this can easily be achieved by a numbered gate or some sort of way that they can access an egress, but would not allow members of the public to get in, to cause a problem with the residents. So I think there's an easy balance there that I accept that we should in some way allow for this.
Rochelle?
I agree with Angus and also with Pauline that we should have something, but it should be accessible for the residents only, not for the public. This way they can actually be able to do things like cycle and things like this much easier, and not to make it an area where nefarious activities could occur. Can we change Pauline's suggestion to include access for residents?
I'm quite happy with that. I'm not intending to take the access away from residents.
I'd be happy to second the.
Let me come to Stephen as well.
Thank you. I was just wanting to clarify, Simon did mention there was a condition already in place which would allow what Pauline was suggesting without having to add another condition. I presume I'm correct in saying, Simon, that what Angus has suggested, which I fully support, that we actually have gates that are accessible only by residents. I assume that could be incorporated in that condition. Is that correct?
Condition 14 deals with aspects of the development, this kind of aspect of the development, so it would be easily accommodated there.
Would it be sensible just to make sure that this is taken into account in condition 14, that we added yet another informative this evening, expressing our wish that this should be the entrances, the pathways onto Cutbush Lane should be accessible only to residents. And if we do that, then we've given guidance to you, clear guidance that we would like that negotiated into the discussions regarding condition 14.
I think most members seem to be happy with that approach. Question is, does it go into condition 14 or do we have an informative alongside? condition 14?
I think Simon said that condition 14 you can cover it within that. From a member's point of view, that's obviously your direction to have secure gates only used by the residents. So I think if you want to put an informative on just adding that direction to any decision, that's fine. It'll be noted by the officer who's dealing with the application in the future.
Okay.
I would therefore propose that add informative.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I'm happy.
Pauline proposed the.
Yeah, I'm
This is
happy
an amendment to the condition as well, isn't it? So.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it in whichever way the planning officers say is
Okay.
most effective.
I think you had a second originally.
I don't think it is an amendment to the condition.
It's not really
Chairman.
a condition alone, do we?
It's an informative that gives a steer to the planning officer that that's what the committee wants when he negotiates the terms of condition 14.
Okay, is that correct, Simon?
Yes,
Just informative.
That's I'm content with an informative. That's fine.
Okay, so Stephen will take your proposal. Pauline will second it. Okay, yes. I see those in favour of adding that informative. Thank you very much. I'm aware that Mr. Sorry. So difficult, Mr. Wojciech. Did you have your hand up? Did you wish to say something?
I do, yes.
Okay.
Just a quick clarification or two on the first one on the astronomer. He has written papers on the likes of near-Earth asteroids, and NASA have actually looked at those that he has raised. So that's one point. The second point, I haven't heard any discussion yet about the dangerous S-bend that we've got with the two proposed entrances and exits onto Strandway. And that actually is quite a dangerous corner. So I'd like the council to address that particular topic if possible. Thank you.
You comment on that, Simon?
Yeah, I'll just quickly pick that up. In terms of, yeah, I mean, obviously the Strandway has been there for some time. It's not a significant S-bend as being reported. It's no different to a number of the bends that we've actually introduced to speak of strong measures on, for example, like the Norfolk Distributor Road that's recently been constructed. And obviously having a look at the accident data, there's been no reported accidents on this section for in the last 5 recorded years. In terms of the 2 accesses being placed in this location, again, they're kind of low-level car parks. They're not intended to be, of obviously frequent high use. That's not the type of residential nature that's being proposed here. Visibility is deliverable, as well as the parking in this location. So there's no reported highway safety concerns that we have. And obviously, as it moves through to detailed design and construction, they'll need to provide safety audits for the works that they've delivered as well. So no, we've got no issue with this site.
Thank you, Chris. Carl, if you want to come back.
Thanks, Chair. It's just it's a point that Stephen made a long time ago, actually, that I kind of staring at the plan on page 128. He was making the point about light spill into number 20. And Simon showed us a photo of what that would look like, and it was opposite a fence. And I'm looking at this diagram, this plan, and I can't really recognise how that photo fits it. Because it seems to me that the photo's taken probably about 6 or 7 meters to the right of where that access would be, where the cars coming out of that car park would be pointing. So I just want to get a clarification whether this plan is correct or whether the photo has been taken in the wrong place or not.
Can we get that photograph out?
I can. I'll just refer also to the plan I think you're referring to. I think it's this plan here.
Yeah.
The photo is taken more or less about that point there, as you can see that around about there, I think. So the view is it would be the access from this point here would be, if the car's going out, it would be looking across to that corner. This access up here is looking out that way there. So the photo I was referring to would be from that access there, and I'll bring up the photo for you. that access there. So I take your point. The headlight glare, I think, would be to that point there. I'll then scroll here. So right, on the run here, the row of properties there is 28 through to 36 of these properties through here. So that there is an access. The gap between 28 and 24 is an access. It is slightly visible on the right hand side here. So if you're coming out of this car park, which will have 12 of the 18 spaces, you are headlight glare in from this point here across there. So my view is that the separation is not dissimilar to a standard residential situation. So sorry, it's well in excess if anything. So the issues of headlight glare probably I don't think is a concern.
I would just add to that, Simon. Obviously, if you were looking at Strand Way, for any vehicles travelling along Strand Way, property 20 would probably have a greater level of light from vehicles heading towards it if they were driving along the road than they probably would for vehicles coming out of the car park. So if you were travelling from, say, 38 heading east, you'd have more vehicle glare coming along the carriageway towards fronting 20 than you would coming out of, I think, the car park for those six parking spaces.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well made, Chris.
Right, anybody else? Bill?
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Going back, I'm going to keep going back, but go back to a car park. If you look at the plan, it shows that units B and C have parking spaces for 6 cars, if you like. They're not allocated, I know, but effectively they have parking for 6 spaces. And unit A has parking for 12 spaces. They are not connected in any way. So you could get the situation where somebody pulls in to go to unit B and C, finds no space, immediately has to pull out again and go into the 12 car parking space. Is there any way that the 2 parks, I know it would be difficult, we might lose a car parking space, but they could be linked to save that happening? And it seems rather inconvenient that we've got 12 for block A and 6 for block B and C. I think I'm reading the plan right.
You are. I think, Bill, just from looking at that, you're right. It would probably take out more spaces, and I think it would be beneficial too. I'm not sure what the landscaping's like to the front of it, and being the car parking spaces are at the front and quite level, I think you probably would have quite clear visibility into them, being they are quite close to the road, to be able to see if there was available space before turning in. Strand Way as well, so it's not known to be that frequently busy, so obviously slowing down to have a look before you turn in would also give you greater ability. But I think it is worth identifying that, again, I don't think it's been picked up or mentioned tonight, but obviously in terms of the level of parking, there is an over provision of parking here, which should aid in, obviously, again, the smaller car parks serving, B, C and A, obviously delivering an element of it. But if there has been, and I know there's been reports of on-street parking, that there is an ability there for being it's all the same occupier owner, that there is the ability that some of that unallocated parking could be used for other parts of Liberty House, which could help to obviously improve some of the parking constraints that have been highlighted tonight. But I personally feel, we've looked at it, this isn't too dissimilar from others that we've seen constructed. And I understand the point you're making, but I think we'd probably create more hassle and lose parking by trying to connect the two. And I don't think it's something that would really benefit the scheme.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Nobody else wishing to speak? So go to the recommendation. Right, sorry. Recommendation on page 94. We have that informative that we just we voted on it. You voted on it? Just one? Yes, excellent. That's how I like it that way. It's just one, was it? Nothing else? Okay. Yep.
There was the point on sill, but I presume that doesn't need a proposal.
I don't think so.
The contract point.
But your point on so whether it was payable or not.
The point on making sure that if something changed and you ended up selling at units, that it became payable as part of the legal agreement.
Yeah, I don't think it's a condition. Okay, so let's see those in favour of approving this application, please. Thank you. Anybody abstaining or voting against? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. That was the last application. No, supplementary planning and we've got no preemptive site visits, 2 non-householder appeal decisions, both of which council won. But well done to the officers involved in those. Thank you very much, members. Some very effective and penetrating questions. So good evening. Thank you very much. Good night.